Alright guys, today we're going to be making a computer. So here is our part selection. We have a Ryzen 1700 8-core CPU, the AMD stock cooler with the black back plate. We have a GTX 1050 from MSI. We have Trident Z RGB, 8 gigs, 30,000 megahertz, 3,000 megahertz RAM, a 1 terabyte Seagate hard drive, and then the Crosshair 7 Asus motherboard. So let's get into the build.
Alright, so before we get building, we're gonna want to do a couple things first. As you can notice, our area for the most part is generally clean. And we have all of our parts laid out for what we're going to do what we're doing. So what we're first going to do is we're going to just try and put in the bare minimum parts to where it can post. But before we do all of that, there's a couple things you need to know or do. First, you're going to want to know where your fire extinguisher is in case you screw up and do something wrong, set the area on fire. Our fire extinguisher is just outside the door, and it is a C-class because C-class fire extinguishers are for electrical fires. Next thing you want to do is your ESD protection, or electrical static discharge. So you get an ESD strap, just take it, put it on something metal, use a computer, or just a metal part on the computer chassis, and then you are grounded. So once you have all that sorted out, clean area, know the location of your fire extinguisher, and you are grounded, then you're ready to start building your computer. So let's start building.
First things first, you're going to want to start with the CPU. The CPU has a golden triangle and a plastic triangle for lining up the socket and the CPU so it goes in the right way. You take down the arm and that secures the CPU. That's done. And then next we can put in the RAM or the CPU cooler. I'm gonna put in the CPU cooler first because it makes more sense. Before you put on your CPU cooler, you're gonna need to have thermal paste. So for Ryzen CPUs, the general consensus is 1 small grain of rice sized bead. That should be plenty. And you're going to apply your heat sink and just give it a little bit of downforce so that it can spread evenly. Line up the screw holes with the screws. And with Ryzen systems, you're gonna have to do it in an X format, especially because the springs will tension against the rest of the board, and it's pretty bad for your motherboard and or CPU if you do not do these in the next pattern. It's also extraordinarily difficult to get them started if you do one side too deep and one side differently. Now that's one of the main features of the AMD stock cooler. You spin it and then the screw will automatically stop, and that's when you know that you have applied the proper amount of pressure. There it is. Now here is the CPU fan header. On this motherboard, you'll have to find it on your motherboard, but it's generally in this area. Plug that in, that's good. We're only going to be using one of our 2 sticks of RAM because we're just trying to get it to post and make sure everything works. Your CPU cooler may interfere with your RAM placement. Ours does, so yeah. You're going to push down your RAM until it clicks just like that. And now on to moving it into the computer case.
Alright, so when you move it into the computer case, you're gonna Here's the IO shoot. Never mind. I'm retarded. Screw fell out. Alright, but you're just gonna take it and move it to your computer case. You're gonna line it up with everything. For us, we already previously took our power supply and put it in, and because this is a special power supply, where we can take cables, take them in and out. What's it called again? Fully modular
power supply.
Yeah, it's a fully modular power supply where you can take the cables in and out of the power supply so that, well, you don't have just random cables in it cluttering up the entire area. All right, it's good for cable management. And so what we already did before we started this was we went ahead and took everything, took all of our necessary cables and put them in and hooked them in through the area. So once you get your motherboard in,
I need this.
you need to screw it down.
You're gonna need like 7, right?
So,
That's a normal.
yeah.
I need to at least have all the outsides.
Yeah. So you're just gonna take the entire thing and screw it down. We're gonna go ahead and skip this part because it does take a tad bit of time.
And now that we have the motherboard in and seated properly, we'll be putting our hard drive in. We already have the cables pre-ran, so we don't have to really worry about it. Just drops in there and clicks. Now time for the fun stuff. It's a very simple installation for a graphics card. Simply slide it into the slot, line it up, and should just be able to. Did I do this wrong? No.
Line it up right.
That's in there. So it's a little bit of. So it seems that this isn't lining up the way I thought it would. Bottom first.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. And then line up second. And then apply down pressure, clicks right in. And then normally you would secure it with a screw, but since we're only
We're just trying to get it to post, then we're not going to really worry about screwing it down.
Yeah.
Because it's only going to be on for a few seconds. So,
now time for power cables. So first things first is going to be your, normally it would be your 6-pin, it's all on the back. So,
oh my god.
whoever you previously did this. Okay. So first things first, you're going to want to grab your 20+4 pin and find the connector on your motherboard. And it'll take a little bit of force, but it'll just click right in. Next thing,
Your CPU connector. Where's our CPU connector?
I'm looking for it. 4 pins.
Is it already through? Check this.
No, right. Is it even hooked up? It should be here. It's not.
So it's possible we may have forgotten about the CPU connector. Not sure how we could forget such a silly little thing, but it's not back here. CPU connector is not in here. Okay, so
CPU connector.
you're gonna want that.
Yeah. So you're gonna plug it into the power supply at the proper little place. It'll just say CPU and stuff.
Yeah, so just to recap, you don't typically do that, but because we got a modular power supply, we are a special exception to the madness.
Routing cables can be
Our cable may not be long enough.
Cable is long enough. Look at it right there. Where's the second CPU connector?
Doesn't cord all the way back there.
What? Okay. Continue. Just.
Okay, so this is being a bit stubborn because our cable.
Okay, flip it.
No, it's alright. Just together. Mess it in there. Half of it in. Alright. I'm sorry about this, but our cable is really short. Alright, so that's our CPU connectors.
Well, it's not. We need the second
Why do we need a second?
one. See that?
Okay, so for this case, we need two CPU connectors.
This is where getting the proper power supply and proper motherboard compatibility works. Our power supply has 2 CPU connectors, and our motherboard has 2 CPU connector ports. So, fun stuff.
That's a little donkey. Alright. Let's see. Oh, this one's longer.
Is it?
I'm pretty sure it is, because I'm having a heck of a lot easier time getting in it.
Wow.
I think. Wait. Alright, now we have all of our CPU power connectors in there. Alright, next you're going to want our graphics card. If you look up here, it needs extra power to it, so you're just going to take your PCIe power connector and you plug it in. If I could get it to click.
It's in.
Alright, it's in.
Yeah, that's in.
Alright. Next thing, we're going to put it back.
No.
Yes,
We got
right
so
now.
much more.
Pull those cables through.
Alright, so here's the bundle of cables that comes with every case coming from the front panel. So right here is the USB 3.0 connector jack, the HD audio jack, the USB 2.0 jack, and then the RGB jack for the RGB controller that is implemented in this case. And then also a bunch of a fan splitter. So, first things first, we're gonna
just pull these through here.
No. Those two, yeah, we need. Okay. So, in order for the front panel audio to work, you're gonna need to plug in your HD audio into the HD audio port.
Let's put it back on its back so they can see.
Yeah. Most of the time it'll be down here and say right where it is. I'm pretty sure.
Usually it's about right here.
Yeah, this is it.
Alright, so usually your audio connector is on the left side of the board closest to the back.
And near the bottom. That's where all your I/O connectors go. The USB 3.0 connector.
USB 3.0 usually goes to the right of the board. And then your just regular USBs are usually in between USB 3.0 and your audio.
Now, USB jacks will not always be used for USB purposes. Sometimes they're used for SD card readers and other different add-on devices. Just check where it goes to. I know what it helps and supports. Okay. And last but not least is the front panel connectors. Don't know how they got there. So with this case, you get your front panel connectors and then a front panel connector layout so that you can just plug them all in and then plug them directly into the board. And it's keyed, so it only goes one way. This will not come with every motherboard, and each one of these is board specific, but there you go. So that should be everything with cables, except for running a SATA power and data to the hard drive. So
Alright, so our SATA ports, they're over here on this side. and we're gonna have to flip this back on its side so that you can see us plug everything in. So let's turn her around.
Now, since we're just trying to make this work for right now, we aren't gonna really worry about the fan connectors or much else, especially RGB, because that matters. Yeah, so SATA connectors, they're keyed, so this will only go in one way.
The same thing goes for the power cable with all of this. It's keyed like an L. You just can take it, I'm gonna plug it in.
You got it right.
Yeah, I know I got it right. I just can't get it in. There we go. Alright, so once we have those in, we're gonna take this, flip it back over. Alright, so when we flipped this over, we ran out of time to do this, and so coming in today, I made a couple changes. So if you look at the motherboard, the RAM or the memory, it's now in the first slot because of interference from the stock cooler. If you look over right here, this part was interfering with the RAM placement. So by flipping around, I was able to put the memory stick into the first slot, which is typically where it's supposed to go, since it's closest to the CPU. So with that change in mind, we're not going to plug this up. We have the power cable, and then we have our DVI connector, which plugs into our graphics card. So with those plugged in, our monitor turns on. Right. So you don't take note of this little switch on your power supply. When it's open, it means off. When it's just a line, now it's on. So it lit up, and now it's ready to go. So we're just gonna wait for a couple seconds as it tries to boot to the monitor or display on monitor. This on, right? Okay, so I did Oh, there it is.
It's not doing anything because there's no keyboard detected.
Yeah, clearly.
Well, we booted.
We booted, that's all you need.
No, has to post or go to BIOS.
Maybe it's a smart computer.
It's done. We booted. BIOS.
No, it's not. It's booted. Richard, I really don't want to do test out right now. Ah, it's my head. Whatever. Abracadabra, it's now in BIOS. So yeah, now we're just gonna power it back off since it is able to post and go to BIOS. Is we want to do one more thing, and that is add in our extra stuff. We're gonna connect our fans. However, when we do all that, you're gonna make sure you get rid of all the static. So you take out your power stuff, flip the switch off, and then you're just gonna come to the front and just hold the power button until all that turns off. That gets rid of all the static and stuff inside. Alright, so now that we managed to get it to post and go into the BIOS, we're gonna plug in everything else, starting with our second memory module. So you just can take it, lined it up correctly, put it in. All right, that snips and that snaps in, clicks in. We're gonna take this fan to the back, plug it into the system case fan input right here. I'm gonna take this one and plug it in right here. You'll have to refer to your motherboard documentation or just look at your motherboard for where these all go. But once you do that, you should be good. All right, once we do that, right, I'm retarded. We're gonna plug her back up, make sure everything works fine. All right, flip the switch, power it back on. So, nice, beautiful motherboard. All right, and if you look at the screen, you should just get it up and running. So, yeah.
So we're in the BIOS. We have the drives installed. We have the CPU working, the memory working with our both sticks. Both sticks are being detected. The CPU is being detected, and it's volting right, so we're good. Okay, and for the drives, they're being detected. Right. So the SATA 6G black, that's going to be the hard drive, so it's being detected. So everything's being detected and working properly. That next we'll install Windows in the future. Bye.